I would like to share a story with you today if I could. It's one that I find incredibly interesting. Jesus looked at his disciples at one point and told them, you guys need to go down and get on this ship and sail across the sea. And they done just that. And while they were sailing across the sea, a giant storm come their way, terrified them, scared them to death. What I find so interesting about this story is that they did exactly what Jesus told them to do. 100% exactly what the Lord told them to do. Yet the storm still come their way. My name is Justin. This is Built on Faith Homestead. If you'd like to discuss this further, I would encourage you to stick around.
I once was lost, oh, but now I am found. Was blind, but now I see.
So here's the deal. The disciples, they didn't get on the wrong ship, and they didn't sail the wrong direction. They did exactly what the Lord told them to, and when the storm come, they got scared to death. And the only thing they got in trouble for was the fact that they seemed to lose their faith. The Bible says, "O ye of little faith," is what Jesus told them. He was disappointed because they didn't have faith in the storm. See, he didn't say the storm wouldn't come. He didn't say that hard times would not come. But he said to keep the faith when those hard times do come. Oftentimes what you're going to find is if you step out to serve the Lord in whatever capacity that is the Lord wants you to serve Him in, whether that be singing or preaching, or maybe even He wants you to up your prayer life, right? Maybe He wants you to spend more time in that personal, private prayer. Maybe He wants to use you in such a way where you are praying for others and they don't even have any idea that you are praying for them, right? Maybe He wants you to start a YouTube channel. Maybe He wants you to start a Bible study on your lunch break at work or at the coffee shop down the road. Whatever it is you try to do, oftentimes Satan will do all that he can to derail you, to try to keep you from serving Him, from serving the Lord, let me be clear, and to try to keep you in that place of fear where you're scared to death. Why? Because when you're there, then you're not really serving the Lord. You're not doing the things He would ask you to because you're so locked down in fear. See, my concern is, most of the time, Christians, especially here in the United States, base their faith on whether or not things are going right, whether or not things are going well. And this troubles me, right? And I hear it a lot. Well, everything went so smooth, the Lord had to be in it. And then when something falls apart, they go, well, obviously the Lord wasn't in that because it fell apart. Sometimes, not every time, but sometimes, the storms come because you're serving the Lord, not because you're outside of His will. Now, to be clear, I do believe there are times that storms, if you will, of life show up because we are outside the will of God. And I'll use Israel as a nation as that example. Whenever Nebuchadnezzar overthrew Israel, overtook Israel, it was because they were not following the Lord and they were not giving the land its Sabbaths. So they got overtook by Babylon. They got overtook by Nebuchadnezzar, and the Bible said that the land would get its rest while they were in captivity. It was to draw them back to the Lord. However, I want you to know, if you're serving the Lord with all that you can, and you're doing the best that you can, I'm not saying you're perfect, I'm not saying you don't have sin in your life. We all mess up, we all make mistakes. But maybe you are just trying to do His will to the best you can, and what you have found is you're being fought on every step of the way. Seems like you're taking 2 steps forward and you're falling back 3. I want you to know that's just Satan trying to stop you, because here's a fun fact for you. Satan hates the children of God. He's making war with you. He hates you with everything that he has. He wants to stop you from serving Him. He wants to stop you from stepping out. He wants to stop you from doing His will. Can I ask you a question? Why do you think I do these videos and I talk about one world governments and future lockdowns and cashless societies and all of those things? I do those videos because, first of all, I believe the Lord has instructed me to do those videos. And I do those videos because I feel like it's the only way to wake up a few people, right? And even if it wakes up 10 people, it is worth the work. Even if it wakes up 1 person, it is worth the work that is involved. However, oftentimes, when we set out to serve the Lord, man, storms come. If you're a follower of our channel, you know, I made a video, I believe it was last fall, maybe winter. I was trying to cut firewood, and everything I did just was not working, right? I was having all kinds of issues. Everything was breaking and falling apart. And if I remember right, I think I was in revival maybe that week or something, or going to do revival. And I talked in the video how every single time, it's not just coincidence, it's not just part of life, but every single time I set out to do revival or whatever, stuff like that happens. Recently down at the church, we were teaching about sorcery and witchcraft and how embedded into society it is today. And along with that comes idol worship and dark, evil spirit type stuff and all that. And they're all together. It's hard to separate them. And so we talked about even like the names of the days of the week, or the names of the planets, or the names of the months, all of those things, all named after Greek or Roman false gods and all of those sort of things, right? We also talked about Washington, D.C. and the symbolism that's behind a lot of the artwork. And it's not even tinfoil hat conspiracy theory websites, right? It's .gov stuff. It's the own government's admissions of having these Roman and Greek gods in statues and treating our nation and the Capitol building as a temple. It's a terrifying thing, right? Should not be occurring in our nation at all. In a so-called Christian nation, these things should not occur. However, they are, right? And we talked about Hollywood, and we talked about kids' TV shows, and I brought that all the way down to how this happens in our churches as well, with churches doing things like sponsoring yoga at their church and those types of things, all the way down to just idol worship and all kinds of stuff, right? And the spiritual warfare that I went through while trying to do that lesson was extremely intense, right? And then I had a couple of churches reach out and say, hey, we'd like for you to come help with revival. And one of them's at the Marshfield Cowboy Church, and the other one's at Mount Zion, just south of Lebanon. And we agreed, right? We agreed to go and try to help with the revival effort. And ever since then, everything's falling apart. Right, everything I touch breaks. Stuff's breaking down like crazy. I have been a mechanic more the last week than I have ever dreamed, and I don't mean no disrespect to any mechanics that are watching my channel, but why you guys chose to do that for a living, I'll have no idea, but I'm thankful you chose to do it. I don't like working on vehicles. In fact, I have thought about for a long time, and this week kind of proved it. That's something I need to improve on, is my ability to work on those type of things. See, working on houses and fixing, plumbing and electric and carpentry issues on houses, that's all in my comfort zone. That doesn't really bother me. Fixing stuff outside, whatever it might be, water lines coming into the house or sewer lines or any of that's all in my comfort zone. Even working on some of my equipment doesn't really faze me, bother me, right? My old tractor, it doesn't really bother me to work on. But the true blue mechanics, I guess you'd say, of working on vehicles is a weak point that I have, and it's something I know I need to work on. However, it's not been just that. It's just everything. And this last week, my wife, who's pregnant, she got sick. My son got sick. Now it's just going through the household, right? It happens every time. I would love to just chalk it up to life and these things happen to everybody, because they do. But it's an awful big coincidence that it happens every single time we start to do revival, or we go to preach at a youth camp, or we teach on spiritual warfare, or we have an exceptionally good church service, or whatever it is. It happens every single time. So if you're watching this video today and you're just doing the best you can to serve the Lord, and things are just not going how you want them to, right? Maybe stuff in your house, maybe your hot water heater and your fridge and your air conditioner all quit the same week. Lord knows we have been there, and it is frustrating. It is aggravating. It makes you want to just be like, what is the point? And I get that. But I want to encourage you. First of all, you're not alone. And second of all, I read of another time where the apostles, they counted it joy that they were worthy to be persecuted for the gospel's sake. When Satan is attacking you, you know you're being effective. When Satan is warring against you, you know you're doing the things that the Lord would have you to do. Now, I want to be exceptionally clear in this video. There are moments like that, where those Job moments, or those disciple getting onto the ship type moments. There are also times of correction. And you would be ignorant to take everything bad that happens in your life and say, well, it's just Satan trying to tempt me. Sometimes it's correction. And you need to learn to discern between the two. We all need correction sometimes. And sometimes that may look very similar to Satan just trying to draw you away from God, right? It may look very similar. And you have to learn to discern between the two, which means you got to be honest with yourself. Which means if you're living in sin, and you know you're living in sin, and you're willfully sinning, and things are going wrong, you have to be able to admit, you know what, this is God trying to correct me, and I need to knock my sin off, whatever it might be. Also, I do have a huge fear that here in the United States, many of my brothers and sisters in the Lord, their faith is dependent on their surroundings. And what I mean by that is if things are going good, well, then we're in the faith and we're serving the Lord, and the Lord's so good. But if things are going bad, I love the story of Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego, right? I love that story because Jesus was in there with them, the Bible says. With them. Not above them, not beside them, not around them, not close to them, but with them in the fire. I love that story because there he was, right in the midst of it. And I know the Bible says that Jesus will stick closer to us than a brother. And the Bible also says he'll be with us even to the very end of the world. And their faith was shown, really truly shown, whenever they said, whether God delivers us or whether he doesn't, we can't bow to your image. See, I believe Christians in the United States, we're going to be facing some extreme persecution in the coming years, in the coming days, weeks, months, however long it might be. The persecution's only going to get worse. And we as children of God, we need to keep the faith even in the storm, even in the trial, even in the tribulation, even in the heartache, even in the things that are so upsetting that we just want to lash out. We need to keep the faith. Whether things go the way we want them to or not, we need to keep the faith. Whether you get the president elected you wanted, keep the faith. Whether or not persecution comes, keep the faith. Whether or not they try to shut the church doors on threat of imprisonment, keep the faith. Whether they start coming door to door, keep the faith. Whether or not they say you must take this and you must, or you're going to die, you must take the mark, keep the faith. No matter what comes your way, do not let your surroundings dictate your faith. Continue to follow the Lord regardless of what comes. My dear brother, my dear sister, understand that Satan hates your guts. And he's going to war against you. And he's going to find every single way he possibly can. Every weakness, every chink in your armor, every spot that you struggle with, and even things that you are good at. Can I give you an example that I believe with all of my heart? I believe that sometimes there are things that we are exceptionally maybe good at, that the Lord has gifted us in. And Satan will take that and try to use that momentum against you. Whenever I used to play football many moons ago, if I had a guy that kind of beat me and I couldn't get I was a blocker. I was I was an offensive lineman primarily. And you get a hold of a guy and you try to stop him from tackling one of the guys behind you. And if he got the best of you, the best thing I knew to do would be to use his momentum against him and drive him way away from the play. Satan may take your willingness to serve the Lord, and he may try to drive you past where the Lord really wants you. Let me give you an example. Maybe you are very good at being very kind, and you are so fearful of offending people that you really caution yourself against that. So you use all kinds of safeguards because you don't want to offend people. And that's a good thing. That's a really good thing. But if in your efforts to not offend people, you're also not spreading the truth of the gospel, then Satan has taken that momentum of kindness and shoved you further than where the Lord would have you to be. At that point, you're not even being kind. In fact, you're being rather evil because you're not helping the people whatsoever. Here today, please, my brother, my sister, do not let your surroundings determine your faith, but continue to serve the Lord regardless of what comes. I appreciate you guys watching. We'll catch you on the next video.